Some of you probably recognize this already. Course in Miracles. How many of you know of it and heard of it and maybe even looked at it? Okay. Someone in the Zendo who had been coming to the Zendo, he's out of town, lives out of town now, told me that he was been looking into it. And I've had this on my shelf for 20 years, but I never really got into it. So I want to emphasize the fact that I am not an expert on the Course in Miracles, so I might almost take what I say with a grain of salt. But I would like to, I've been looking at it a little bit. I'd like to offer some comments. I thought Marianne Williamson was behind it. It turns out she just popularized it, on Oprah, like 1992 or something. But it actually comes from two professors, psychologists, Helen Schuchman at Columbia, of all places, nearby where I live, and William Thetford, and medical psychology, professors of medical psychology. And she, especially she, they were having a tumultuous professional relationship, and they discovered, they wanted a new approach to life. And she got it apparently through kind of like, not exactly an automatic writing. I've known people who've had that, and there are other examples of that, like Conversations with God, if you know that series, and other things I've come across recently. When you get the communications, you're almost like channeling from, another source. This is what we're talking about, inspiration for scripture, or the Quran. This is the same kind of phenomenon where you're open to a higher source of inspiration, sometimes word for word. So in itself, it's not a bad sign, but it can be difficult, because what are you channeling? In the Meditations on the Tarot, which I've quoted before, there's a whole section on how one of the things that contrary forces can do is, as St. Paul says, be like an angel of light, appearing as an angel of light, but be more like Mephistopheles, the trickster, pretending to be somebody else. The stories in the Fathers of the Desert about Gabriel appearing, and it really isn't Gabriel. It's just kind of building up the pride of the monk. But that's the key, all right? It's just what Jesus said himself, and it makes common sense. What are the fruits? First of all, what's being said, and what are the fruits of it? And I think on that scale, you can, as you can see, could see, I think it can be judged very positively. Look at what we consider scriptures themselves, whether Buddhist or especially, Christian or Islamic for that matter. How have they been used? Not always for the good either, even if we consider them authentic. So it can be tricky that way. It's not a deal breaker just because it comes through that means. And it has a preface about how it came. Another good sign is the beginning of the text. It's huge, by the way. You've got a huge text and a workbook for students and a handbook for teachers. And it's very dense and very long. But talking about the meaning of miracles, talking about the Course of Miracles, and what are you talking about? It's not sensational at all. It's principles of miracles. There are 40 or how many here? 50. Miracles are not spectacles. It says miracles should occur naturally as expressions of love. Miracles mean life. God is the giver of life. Miracles can be natural. It should be healing. So, in other words, it's basically the idea, very Zen, and hopefully very Christian as well, that miracles are every moment. If it's love and openness and compassion and joy, these are miracles, and not just spectacles that are some special thing, which, even in our Catholic theology and spirituality, we fallen into that. Well, let's have a miracle. We need a miracle. Well, you're surrounded. You're a miracle. They're surrounded by miracles. So this is very much her approach as well, which is very healthy. St. Augustine says something similar, which is a little bit humorous. He says, we're talking about turning water into wine. God's doing that every day in vineyards. So in other words, the miracle of the everyday, or as one koan says, you're drinking, 3 cups of the best wine, every moment if you're really savoring life and getting intoxicated on being alive. These are miracles. So that's a really very, very healthy and positive approach to what one should be talking about. Now, what it says, and there's nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal exists. So there's a lot of fog and a lot of, false notion of what really exists. It's very Zen and very Christian too, the illusions we're under. But that what's really real, say our true self, if you like, or our Buddha self, or Christ self, or the absolute, whatever we want to call it, that cannot be threatened. I think Eckhart Tolle has something very similar too, when he says that. So it makes a fundamental distinction, she says, the Course in Miracles, between the real and the unreal, between knowledge, true enlightenment, you might say, and perception. Very Zen, and I would say Christian as well. Truth is unalterable, eternal. It can be unrecognized, but it can't be changed. It applies to everything that God created. So the language here is very much Christian language. It speaks about the Son of God, Holy Spirit. Okay, but you could transfer that to other wisdom traditions. It is beyond learning. It has no opposite, no beginning, no end. The world of perception, on the other hand, the next paragraph says, is the world of time, of change, of beginnings and endings. It's based on interpretation, not on facts. It's the world of birth and death. Okay, founded on the belief of scarcity. So that notion of scarcity that people labor under. Oh, there's not enough. I got to get more, more, more. Loss, separation, and death. Well, in the end, there's no loss, separation, and death. It's not real. It is learned rather than given, unstable in its functioning, inaccurate in its interpretations. So this very much conforms to that notion, that we're not seeing correctly, we're not being correctly, we're not feeling correctly. It is very Zen and very Christian. The only trick, the only possible problem here, and this is something I was just reading up on, not something I found in my, in-depth study of Course in Miracles, is that there does seem to be, apparently, in the presentation, and this is the only negative thing main negative thing that I would caution about. It's a notion that comes up in some strands of Hinduism and Buddhism, something that comes up even in some strands of the Kabbalah and in Gnosticism in the West. The notion that outside of this eternal, where we've fallen from that into materiality and time and space, and that is somehow a fall. It's somehow negative in itself. You can see why, compared to what's real, you can see how you can get into, and even sometimes the experience of time, and life, and but it's very, very dangerous and very incorrect to say that it is bad in itself, that it's a fall, that it's a misfortune. You find that in strands of Platonism and all that stuff as well. As modern Catholic theology has been emphasizing, and as for example, Conversations with God emphasizes, no, it's a joy. It's an expression of love, of sharing, of exuberance. Even the absolute wants to be form. Not just the form wants to be absolute. And they're both intertwined anyway, And that's the other thing. Metaphysically, I was reading a Buddhist interpreters, saying, well, there's no spirit, that's just material energy, science shows us this is just that. That's duality again. I was reflecting. You can't say there's only spirit, and you can't say there's only matter, because those are invented terms. There's just what is. And stop giving it a name. If you want, I like to think that, if you like, matter is just coagulated spirit. There's no separation, as I've emphasized many times in this, theology, good theology emphasizes, and as Zen emphasizes. emptiness is form and form is emptiness. So whatever it is, be open to it. And you'll find it's a lot more vast and marvelous than you think, because you can't think it. So the world of perception and the world of knowledge, they are one. You just have to approach it with an awakened attitude, so that you're not caught up in the ebb and flow of your anger and all, and the clinging and all the stuff, the Four Noble Truths, and the 7 capital sins and all of that are a problem. So you have belief in opposites, separate wills, perpetual conflict with each other and with the absolute. So that is the problem in any spiritual tradition, and that we have to wake up from. That she calls the dream. Well, it is a dream, and it's called that in Hinduism and elsewhere. It can be just a dream. It's not substantial in itself, except connected to the absolute, but it's a dream in the sense that it's it's full of miasmal reactions and projections. In fact, that's one of the main things that she points out. We have to escape from the dream world by reversing our thinking, unlearning our mistakes. Great emphasis on forgiveness. Forgiveness of ourselves, forgiveness of others. That's the gospel, and that's compassion. That is great fruit. You can tell by that. Although it has its own, as it says, its own presentation of forgiveness, but it's basically what we understand. The world we see reflects dominant ideas, wishes, emotions. Projection makes perception. That's what she says. That's a big danger. Projection makes perception. We see what we want to see. We see what's inside. We project it out. Very basic stuff which holds many people prisoner for a long time. We look inside, she says, deciding the kind of world we want to see, and then project that world outside, making it the truth as we see it. Remember Richard Rohr's great phrase, people don't see the world as it is, but as they are, not as it truly is. So we make it true by our interpretations. We justify our own mistakes, our anger, our impulses to attack, our lack of love, in whatever form it may take. We see a world of evil, destruction, malice, envy, and despair, which is mainly projection of our own stuff. If we really saw what was there, we'd leap for joy if we saw the whole picture. All this we must learn to forgive, not because we're good or charitable, she says, but because what we are seeing is not true. We've distorted the world by our twisted defenses and are therefore seeing what's not there. So then we look past that and forgive. We forgive ourselves, looking past our own distorted self-concepts to the self, capital S, that God created in us and as us. Of course, as you know, Zen doesn't use creation language, but it's still that connection with the absolute. Sin is the lack of love. Very good definition. And since love is all there is, sin is a mistake to be corrected rather than an evil to be punished. All right, there's a lot there. Love is all there is. And I said that at the workshop I gave this past Saturday, talking about mysticism. That you can tell if you've had a true mystical experience if you've discovered that love is all there is. Of course, it's what St. John says, God is love, and whoever loves is born of God and knows God. It's the same kind of intuition. But all is compassion, all is love. Very, very Zen. And most sin and evil is a mistake rather than willed as evil. I mean, that's Catholic theology too. You don't choose evil as evil. You're misled and you choose the evil because it's good somehow to you. No doubt in the wrong, perverted, erroneous ways, but so it's always the good we're looking for somehow. And it's good to remember that in our treatment of ourselves and of others. The scarcity principle, so much of our sense of inadequacy, weakness, and incompletion comes from the scarcity principle. Instead of seeing who we really are, like the treasure we're sitting on, the treasure that we are, and rejoicing in that and feeling complete in that. We love others to get something for ourselves, she says, and that's not love at all, because love isn't capable of asking for anything. Love is just pouring out. That's what reality is. Listen to this. Only minds can really join, and whom God has joined, no man can put asunder. That's usually applied to marriage. But the marriage of true minds, when we're all one in our being and in our consciousness, that's heaven, and we can't put asunder. And that's the real goal of marriage, by the way, as I said in a recent homily. It's not just joining of bodies or a contract. It's or producing children even. It's union, complete union of hearts in God, as we would say. The little I seeks to enhance itself by external approval, possessions, external, quotes, love. The self, the true self, needs nothing. It's forever complete, safe, loved, and loving. Great phrase. The true self is forever complete, safe, loved, and loving. It seeks to share rather than to get, to extend rather than project. It has no needs and wants to join with others out of their mutual awareness of abundance. So you come together to share abundance and to exult in life. Now, it speaks about, there's a lot in here about oneness with God, or being children of God, essentially. And some Catholics think it's too New Agey, that it's, I think there's more danger in emphasizing our separation from God, or the absolute, than our union and oneness with it. It's much healthier, I believe, to err on the side of oneness with everything than separation, and unworthiness, guilt, shame. What does that produce? And there is no separation. You can't be apart from God, or apart from the absolute. You can't be. You wouldn't exist. And you're forever loved, safe, complete, as I just said. So, talk about judging by their fruits. What approach is really healthier and more accurate? The opposite of seeing through our body's eyes is the vision of Christ, which reflects strength rather than weakness, unity rather than separation, very Zen, and love rather than fear. There's some interesting quotes about oneness with one another that I've just come across here. There's one error, the space between you and your brother. That's the error. Kept apart by an illusion of yourself that holds him off from you and you away from him. The sword of judgment, the weapon that you give to the illusion of yourself, that it may fight to keep the space that holds your brother off, unoccupied by love. If we saw that as a fundamental error and illusion, there would never be any war. Judge it by your fruits. No one, this is from the workbook for students, 365, one a day. No one but is my brother. I am blessed with oneness, with the universe and God, my Father, or Creator, great Christian language, Creator of the whole that is myself, capital S, forever one with me. 16. All that I do to myself. If I attack, I suffer. And if I forgive, salvation will be given me. Blessed are the merciful, they will receive mercy. Because you're doing it to yourself. Since you're one with everyone, then whatever you do to them, you do to yourself. So if you attack them, you attack yourself. It's like St. Paul's, one body, each member feeling the other. So that is, some very rich and profound stuff. Defenses are laid down because there's no attack and no need for it. Our brothers' needs become our own because they're taking the journey with us as we go to God. Without us, they would lose their way, And without them, we could never find our own. So we're all saved together, or we're all not. Very important. Forgiveness is a necessary connection for all the mistakes that we have made. Giving and receiving are the same, the law of heaven. Heaven is the natural state of all the sons of God as He created them. In other words, you're already complete, you're already in heaven if you just wake up. Such is their reality forever. It's not changed just because it's been forgotten. And finally, the forgiven world becomes the gate of heaven, because by its mercy we can at last forgive ourselves. Holding no one prisoner to guilt, we become free. Acknowledging Christ in all our brothers, Buddha in all of us, if you will, we recognize His presence in ourselves. Forgetting all our misperceptions, and with nothing from the past to hold us back, we can remember God. When we are ready, God will take the final step in our return to Him. So, in Christian language, but you can see it's very Zen too, the fact that we are all one with the Absolute, with others, and it's all one reality, which is vast and eternal. And all this ego-elusive separation stuff of clinging and fear and hatred and doubt and fear, greed, hatred, and ignorance, the three poisons, they're the only things that really hold us back from seeing who we are and being who we are and reacting, being with one another as we really are. Any comments from, especially from those who know the book better than I? So, with caution, I recommend it. If you really got into it, it would really get into it. But, it seems like another example of how the universe seems to be trying to wake us up in this new axial age. So, one of many testimonies that all converge. So, no excuse for not waking up.